Welcome back to Balance Redefined Radio. I'm Connie Silko, your host, and we are back with Dr. Trish for part 2 of our happiness chat. We're talking about choosing happiness no matter the now, but this specific part 2, is helping our children identify and choose happiness no matter the now. And we had just left off on our last one talking about in our day and age, it's just epidemic. I've never seen so much of anxiety, depression, and all their fingerling kind of connectors and cousins, so to speak, in children. And are you seeing, is research helping us understand why that's happening, why there is so much quote unquote unhappiness in childhood, even from kids that are in really good situations? They're not in the middle of, a slum. They're in good situations, but they're struggling. Do we have any ideas and understanding of why that's happening?
Well, I think some of it's diet, which is, again, all of the nutrients in our food is being depleted. But I also think that, again, we're not connecting because we have so many things to distract us. We have all these gizmos and all these fun things to do, and so that we're not really connecting as families. And if we don't connect as families, who do you connect with? That is where you learn to connect. And as we all know, social media, everybody says, oh, this is the online connected generation. They're not. They're isolating with their phones. I mean, when you're sitting there watching people who are at a restaurant and every single one of them has a phone and they're talking on that phone, you lose the moment, you lose what's going on around you. And again, then we're not learning, we're not getting emotions. Social media doesn't have emotions on it. I mean, you can say I'm mad, but you're not learning that. You're not learning to connect.
Yes. And I so agree with you. I think we're missing the synergy experience that we have when we're in the moment with 2 or 3 people, one other person. When we have the synergy that we're reacting in our energy, I call it energy exchange. We're exchanging energy. And so that 1 + 1 = 242. When I'm going to lunch with good friends, she'll say something, I'll say something, she'll bring up a book, I'll bring up a thing, then we found solutions for our kids or questions that we have, and then we're feeling this buoy, like an actual fill to our soul as the energy is multiplying. And so it's an experience. It's not just I'm in the same room as someone. There's an actual experience, and it's a creative thing that's happening. So I absolutely agree with what you're saying and validate that kids are not getting that where they used to get it. I think the studies show that they used to spend 3 to 4 hours outdoors. And now we're lucky if kids get out 15 minutes to half an hour at a given time on a regular basis to get outside. So with this kind of why unhappiness, we're seeing diet, lack of connection, and kind of a lack of communication skills that go along with that. What are some things that we can do with that? Because, video games are not going to go away. Devices are not going to go away. And I know a lot of parents feel frustrated by what kind of rules can I actually set and how do I go about enforcing them without creating this huge blow up and this negativity in the family. How do we go about helping some of these positive, happy things get back in our lives? And what do they look like?
You need to start when kids are young, and some people say, no, I've got teenagers already, I already blew it, but you can start then, and you're not your child's friend, you're your child's parent, and there's a difference in that. They need boundaries, they need structure, they need to know that, because you know what, the brain doesn't develop until the child is in their 20s. The prefrontal cortex, which is the logical reasoning part of the brain, doesn't develop until then. And so it's the impulsive part of the brain that is active in children, which is wonderful. That's the creative, fun, spontaneous part of the child. But they need the counteractive in the parent that, oh, that's pretty impulsive. Let's really think this through and that sort of thing. And so being able to do that, not taking away things, but setting boundaries and making sure your children know how they're feeling, not telling them how they're feeling, but exploring their emotions with them. I think that's kind of one of the problems that we have now, is that we're not exploring emotions. We're not allowing people to feel or even what that feels like to feel and to have these emotions. And what do you do do with them. Because again, when someone's having a tantrum because they can't, be on and you see this all the time because their parent just took away their smartphone from them and they have this little tantrum going on here.
Yes.
And so tell me about that and what's going on with you and that sort of thing. And maybe not in the moment, just letting them settle down. But then again, is that how you want to feel? That sort of thing, exploring with children.
I love that idea of exploring those emotions instead of just reacting to a temper tantrum, instead of just saying, oh, for the love, really? It's a device, right? We're going to try to be reasonable and rational with them. And they're not going to be in a rational state of mind. But I love that you're saying, is this how you want to feel? Is this how you want to behave? Is this how you want to be as a person? Being able to go back to those more core kind of things. I love that idea. And taking the focus off of the thing that just happened and more of the root behavior or the idea of why they're doing what they're doing. I think that's so key. And I love this idea of we set boundaries. And even with teens, I've got teenagers, I've got a little guy at 7, I've got that spectrum. And I've noticed it right now it's summer and it's hard to set those boundaries because there's a lot of downtime or they've worked really hard at work and then they want to come home and they just want to chill, right? But we've still had to set those boundaries on the social media. And that's not a bad thing. I think it's so key. I know as a parent, and I'm a pretty strong parent, but I feel that nervousness too with my teenager of sometimes our relationship can be fragile and I want to keep that line open. And sometimes there's that nervousness in a parent that they think, well, if I'm not being so strict, I can keep that line open. But what you're saying is exactly right, that the boundaries create security and especially the way that we approach it. So for example, my kids in the summer, we've had to set up a thing of, okay, there's an hour for talent time. That means whatever you choose to do in that hour, you can play the piano, you can draw, you can do whatever, but that hour, no device, it's for you doing some kind of talent. And then there's reading time, an hour for reading. Well, if you want to take a nap and not read, that's your choice, but it's reading time. And that's what we're doing, or outdoor time. Sometimes, and that sounds kind of cheesy maybe for a teenager, but I've noticed that she's even said to me, I want to do these things, but I just don't think about it. And we have to create that schedule, that opportunity for those things that, hey, let's go on a hike on Saturday and everyone's groaning. That's fine. Teenagers are supposed to groan, right? So it's okay. We've just got to create, I think, as parents, those happiness opportunities that we know are going to actually bless their lives, even if they don't initially want to do it, right?
You know what? You're so right. Because again, teenagers aren't thinking. Kids aren't thinking. It's kind of like when you say to a teenager, what were you thinking? They weren't thinking because their brain is not developed. But one of the things I think we have to be really cognizant of is our own feelings. I mean, when our children melt down or they're upset or something, how are we feeling? We might have to take a time out before we can even talk to them about it. And there's a study out there now, which is really, really scary to me here in Utah, is that the teenagers, they asked them all these questions about why suicide is so rampant and that sort of thing. And one of the top things is they do not trust the adults in their lives.
Wow.
And so that means parents, that means teachers, that means church leaders. They don't trust them. And so you have to ask yourself, why is that? And is it because the adult is not acting the way they're talking, that they're not setting the example? They're saying you shouldn't do this and you should do this, but they're not doing it themselves. So as parents, if we're telling our children that time on the phone isn't good, then we have to look at our own time on the phone.
For sure. And if we're saying, hey, that's not going to make you happy, that's not going to bring happiness to you if you do X, Y, and Z, but then we're not showcasing that happiness too. And in the sense of not putting on a show, but in the sense of, wow, I am not on social media. Instead, I read a book, or I did some talent stuff. I did some writing, or, oh, we went on a hike and I feel so happy. If we're not modeling that, then how can we suggest to them, this is actually going to make you happier? So I love that we have to be the ones that step back and go, okay, how am I doing on modeling that happiness and then creating those opportunities? And I know we talked a lot about that in part 1. So if you want to hear more about addressing your own happiness, you can check out the part 1 of this. But taking that learning and then creating these opportunities for our kids, let's talk a minute about what we can do to create traditions of happiness. What are some things that research is showing or that you have seen in your practice that as a family or regarding the children, what are going to more often or more typically bring in that happiness factor, will create the environment for happiness?
One of the major things is that all of us need is a sense of belonging. We need to belong somewhere. And so extended family things are so important. Traditions that you go to the lake every August, or that you know, go on a walk with your family on Sunday afternoons, or whatever it is. Something that those kids can relate to and feel this is a tradition and this is what happens in our family, that creates security then with the family. Also, the research shows that grandparents that are involved in families, the kids are more grounded, they get better grades in school and are happier. Again, there's that sense of connection. There's that sense of I belong to something bigger than myself and bigger than my family, and in genealogy and things like that, and knowing your history and where you came from and things like that. Kids actually love that sort of thing.
That's beautiful. And then those stories that you can pass down. You know, your Aunt Berta, she loved mint chocolate chip ice cream and a waffle cone, and she would eat it just like this and then suck out the end, you know, at the bottom. Those kind of history things that kind of draw them closer to, like you said, they've got a solidity, and they know that, oh, if mom or dad are mad today, that's okay because grandma and grandpa are there, my cousins are there, and I can just go somewhere else to them and just chat with them, right? Instead of everything is on this one person.
And you know something else too, what you were talking about, Aunt Bertha or whatever it was, it's this, you have this characteristic that your grandmother had that was so wonderful. Everybody loved her humor and you're just like her. Again, there's that connection to grandma and grandpa that is important.
And that goes back to that sense of self and that belief in self, of that self-esteem, that self-worth. This is who I am, and I am a worthy person. And look, there are evidences as to why that are true. Those are true. That evidence, Aunt Bertha had that sense of humor, and people love that. And guess what? I've got that same sense of humor. What a blessing. So I love that we are establishing those things by these sort of happiness traditions. So many layered things happen with these family moments, these family traditions that are fingerling and layered, and they're happening all at the same time. That family meals, having a meal together, whether it's breakfast or lunch or dinner, doesn't matter. Maybe you're having snacks around the fire pit, but that connecting time, I have found for us, is so huge. We actually, last summer, we got a fire pit and we were putting it together. And even that was a memory maker. My daughter and I are like putting the patio furniture together and the fire pit. And it was hysterical. It's kind of a personal joke, an inside joke now. And then just last night, going outside and putting that fire pit on it. That it creates the memories, it creates connection. It's a setup for that connection. Doesn't mean we do it every night, but I've noticed how important it is for us to have predictable times and predictable places for us to create that connection so that we can have those happy memories. We can feel those good feelings. Just very quickly, the other day I was going through a cookbook, and it's Anne Romney's cookbook. And I had forgotten that she had like chapters where they talk about their family life and things like that. And then she gives recipes for July 4th, how we celebrate that. And then here's recipes that we do. And I have to tell you, that comparison thing, as I'm reading through it, I'm like, this is gorgeous. They're on this family lake, Winnipesaukee, and they're, you know, they have boating and they have a huge family. And then they have everyone taking turns cooking, and they all kind of bring their favorite recipes to the table. And it's really fun. And kids are running in and out with all kinds of cousins. It was beautiful. And then I had to stop and not go down a road of, wow, that is not our life. I mean, we have facets of that, but we don't have this huge brood here. And we don't have a lake, a cabin on Lake Winnipesaukee. And that's not the point that she was making. She was making, hey, we've created our traditions and they are working to bring happiness. And I started turning around and saying, great, what traditions can I create that will bring happiness, a predictable happiness? So the point that I wanted to make is, when you hear things like that, don't go down this negative path of, oh man, we don't do anything like that. No wonder we're so unhappy, right? More of, what can I do to create those predictable places and predictable experiences that can create those moments of happiness?
Do you know, and something else, I think we're so, the selfie generation, right? we take more pictures than anybody, you know, I mean, everything we do, oh, let's take a picture of what we're eating tonight and all these sorts of things. It cracks me up. But the thing is I keep thinking, really, are those the memories you're making? Just taking a picture, or are you really making memories? Sometimes I think it's because we want the world to know that we're having fun and that we're happy again, instead of truly being happy and create those picture or those memories. And so, yeah, I say get rid of your phone sometimes. Take it at the end of your vacation. Don't make your vacation and the happy moments all around pictures.
You are so spot on. In fact, one of my good friends got back from her trip last week from July 4th, and she posted about it and she said, don't have a lot of pictures, focus on family. I was like, beautiful, beautiful. And that, I know when I go out to lunch with my friends, we stick our phones in our purses so that they're off the table. They're not even there. And the only time we pull them out is if we have a book recommendation we wanted to write down or something. But same thing with our kids.
Yeah, irritating. And when you're having this conversation and someone takes a phone call.
Yes. And you're like, or wants to take, like you said, a picture. And I've been guilty of that. Oh, this food looks so good. And you want to take a picture of it, right? But it doesn't have to, you don't have to do that. And I love this when we're bringing this back to this whole with kids identifying and choosing their happiness, is making that correlation with them of how long can you take a space from that device? And then how do you feel after that? I know in our church, it was encouraged to have a social media fast, meaning for 7 days at one time, another time it was 10 days, but just having a fast from it and just paying attention. How did that make me feel? And I think these kids don't understand that there's not just that blue light that's an actual scientific thing of this is not healthy for you, but there's actually this kind of a seeping in experience where they're not even realizing that as they scroll, maybe it's just me, but it reminds me of gambling. It's almost like, I'm almost going to find something cool. I'm almost going to find something cool. I'm looking for something cool. So you're never in a state of happiness or contentment. It's always, is there something better? Is there something better? Is it going to come up? Is it going to come up? Like you're going to try to win the lottery. And I think this seeps into kids where they feel a lack of contentment. And that makes them feel a lack of happiness, where they can't just go out and lay on a blanket and look at the sky, or go jump on a tramp and just be happy. Or my daughter the other day just went and took her art stuff with a friend, and they just did art at the park. It was just beautiful, where, okay, we're getting back to these core, simple experiences that help us feel this contentment and this peace and this yumminess inside that we're not getting from these other quick hit kind of things.
And you know what we're doing, I think, is we're overstimulating our kids before they're ready to be stimulated. I think it's an age appropriateness that we need to know that some kids can't go to Star Wars because they're too young, or some of those things. I had a grandson, I have a grandson, but one time we took him to Legoland in California, which is so creative and it was so fun. But it's not terrifically stimulating. There's not flashes and roller coasters and all that sort of thing. And he was bored to tears. And I thought, oh my gosh, again, we are overstimulating with things that are computer or technology, which is great in some degree. But you're right, nature, going out and being creative, all those things we need to bring back to our children. And one other thing too, I think is really important, teaching our children leadership skills is really important. When instead of going along with the crowd, how do you feel? Do you really want to do that? One of my son, when he was in 6th grade, the teacher said, oh, I love that Brandon is in my class this year, because most boys just kind of in 6th grade, they don't even care. But Brandon stood up and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do our homework. We're going to get good grades and those sorts of things. And she says, all the boys in the class just followed him and they all got good grades and they were all wonderful this year. And so it was wonderful. And so teaching your children that they can be that leader that other kids follow. We're going to turn off our phones right now. We're going to do this and we're going to do other fun things, teaching them that when they're young, again, that what they believe and what internally feels good to them is something they need to pay attention to.
I love that. And that leadership aspect, or that were a capability thing, they learn how to do a skill or they develop a talent. This creates that self-esteem. This creates that feeling of happiness. I did that. I became that. And there's an intrinsic value to that, that you don't have to praise about it all the time to try to help them feel that. They feel it. They got that. They got that hit. And I love that you bring that up, giving them those opportunities for that kind of experience. I know when I was in ninth grade, I wanted to do student council, and they sent us to a leadership camp. Again, it doesn't have to be just leadership camp. It can be any kind of thing where they're developing those talents. Again, not in a frenzied, let's have them be in an advanced team at age 9, not that way, but just, wow, the thrill of developing and becoming more capable. And I still remember things from that ninth grade camp, more so the feeling that I had of trust, that people looked at me like, oh, you're a leader. So then they expected me to act like a leader. And when I acted that way, I felt so good. I felt very capable and I felt happy. So I love that you're sharing these kinds of things of creating these expressions, these experiences and things that will help them feel that happiness and have that opportunity to feel it in a way that's actually connected to emotions and not just a superficial hit.
And parents, don't again, we shouldn't rely or emphasize the external, and too much praise sometimes is bad too. Instead of praising, encourage your children to get in touch again with those emotions that they're feeling. And how do you feel about this? Did that make you feel good? Well, then you'll probably want to do that again, right? That is so much more motivating than, oh, you're so wonderful, that was such a wonderful thing you did. Because if they didn't feel like it was wonderful, they're going to discount what you just said.
And it's not aligned, and they can feel that it's not aligned. And
Right.
that's in those hard moments, again, going back to that happiness factor of teaching them that, yeah, sometimes it isn't that great. We just had this joke the other day about, do you like this? And it's like, well, I like that your hands made it. You know what I mean? Because you got to tell them the truth. Wow, that's not your best work, but not in a mean way. There's laughter, there's joy, there's an acceptance of, I'm not asking you to be tip top every single day. That's not what, it's an experience. We're learning, we're progressing. I love how much progression that you've made. And that was me talking with my sweet daughter, where from the beginning, day one, to now, she's been now a few weeks in France. And it's been so interesting to see that, when she started off, she was in tears, and now she's like learned so much and she's become so much in just a short time. But I'm the one that has to point that out to her. And that made her happy. I said, do you remember when you were first talking to me? It was like 22 tissues. I'm like, today it's like 2 little things of tears and you're on and you're good. And look, you've been talking to people and you're actually singing in French. And wow. And so I love that. Instead of just random praise, being able to help them identify those things that have brought them happiness and that you've seen have brought them happiness, helping them to learn to identify those things. Just like you did in the first part that we were talking about, a gal that came to you in your practice that she was miserable, and you're like, hey, do you want to stay miserable? She's like, wow, am I miserable? And then change, because she identified what wasn't working, being able to create what was working. Same thing, we can identify that, like you're saying with our kids. Wow, how did that feel? You like that feeling? Great. What can we do to increase that? What can we do to repeat that?
And something else too, I think we've lost is curiosity, being curious. I mean, we live in this world that just go, 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 go. Instead of, giving them moments where they, just look at the stars or just look at this, nature and things like that. But also being curious. How does that work for you? How's that improving you? How are you feeling about that? Being curious about our kids so that they can then express that to them instead of saying, oh, that doesn't matter. Sometimes we minimize our kids too much. We minimize their feelings and how they're thinking. And so then they start to internalize that I'm not worth it, instead of, oh, mom is really interested in how I'm feeling and how I'm seeing the world.
And I love that word. I think that's such a key word. I know as a parent, as a mom of 7, I can't go around every day and go, oh, you're awesome, and you're wonderful, and look at that, and notice every little thing. So those that are listening, do not feel overwhelmed like, oh, I'm not supposed to do this, and now I'm supposed to do this. Not at all. These are just thoughts that to share so that you can pick and pluck one that says, you know what, that's what I want to focus on. Because that interest, I love that word. That's been a key factor in me staying connected with my kids. I've been watching over the years saying, why is it that I have really good relationships with most of my kids? Other ones have chosen not to, and that's their choice. But why is it that I have really good relationships with them? Why do they've told me, like, mom, I feel like I can tell you anything. And mom, I really appreciate that we have this kind of relationship. We can laugh, we can banter, but we can get stuff done and we can have hard conversations. So why is that? And this is not like, okay, this is, the work in progress, people. This is not like every minute is, So I've gone back to that. And one of the key things is interest. I don't know if for parents out there with the whole Lego thing or like Pokemon cards. Oh my gosh, I had boys first, and I'm telling you, it drove me crazy. Talking nothing but Legos, talking nothing but Pokemon cards. And I'm thinking, please, someone, my eyes are going to roll in the back of my head if I have to talk about this one more time. But getting interested in what they were doing. We don't have to do it for an hour and a half each time, even if it's 5, 10, 15 minutes of just their eyeballs, and ask them, so tell me about that card. My 7-year-old, where I've had to act out the Pokemon, the dragons, and then he's telling me this is what they can do and this is what they can't do. And I'm 53. I'm like, I do not want to be acting out Pokemon dragons, on the floor. But giving him that 5, 10 minutes and that word that you use, that interest, makes them so happy. They feel seen, they feel heard, they feel loved, they feel like I matter, even from just a few minutes of validating that. So I love that word. That's a key word of interest.
And the other thing is sometimes we try to make our children into something they're not instead of what they are. And so again, being curious about who they are and their personalities and observing instead of so much telling, observing and listening. We don't have a society that does that so much anymore, but it is so important because again, if you want your children to confide in you, you've got to listen.
And that's going back to kind of full circle, that creating those opportunities, the predictable places and predictable experiences that they can count on. Maybe it's I can go sit and talk on my mom's bed at night. I know before we have family prayer, or I can go and in the morning when she goes for her walk, I can go with her, or these predictable things. We always go to Aunt Jen's for, 4th of July fireworks or whatever it might be, that we have these kind of predictable things. They don't have to take a long time. They don't have to be set in stone in the sense of I do this every day. Not at all, but just predictable places and experiences that they can feel that sense of belonging, that who they are, and this opportunity to create these happy memories, these happy feelings. And then I love what you shared of help identify those. How did that make you feel? Did you love being out the fire pit? Wasn't that so fun? It was fun to share last night. Thanks for taking a minute. That was so great. And they go, oh yeah, that was happy. I enjoyed that. That was fun. And identifying so they can choose that, repeat it again and again for them to feel that happiness. Is there one last thing, anything that you wanted us to cover or share about helping your children to identify and choose that happiness as we're wrapping this up?
I just think, again, it goes back to your sense of who you are, because your children will feed on that. And so if you're happy with who you are and excited about life, then that's what your children will be. And it doesn't mean that we're like that all the time, because we're not. But working on yourself, we're a work in progress. And so are our children.
And I love that, giving each other space to figure it out as you go. Oh, I like that. That made me happy. Did this make you happy? Okay, then we can add that in and we can make this more of a predictable thing if we liked that. I love that. Great ideas again to helping our children identify and choose happiness. If you wanted to talk more specifically about anxiety in your children, there's another podcast about that. So check that out, another interview with Dr. Trish, so you can get specific tips on that. And again, if you want more about choosing happiness within yourself to be able to better model that, we have the part 1 of this interview series. On this particular one, it's called Choosing Happiness No Matter the Now. And as always, thank you for joining us. If you want more, subscribe below. Great, have more great stuff for you. And of course, as always, make this year your year. Get balanced, redefined.